We are live.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Exam Schools Admission Task Force. Because this is a remote session, I will ask Ms. Parvex to call the roll, please.
Thank you, Mr. Contempasis. Mr.
مساء
Acevedo,
الخير. اليوم لقائنا
sorry, Mr. Acevedo. Ms. Aguirre. Mr. Chernow. Mr. Kreger.
Present.
Dr. Freeman Wisdom. Ms. Grassa. Ms. Lam.
Present.
And I think I saw Ms. Grassa. Ms. Nagasawa.
Present.
Ms. Skerritt.
Present.
Dr. Tung.
Present.
Ms. Waite.
Present.
Ms. Sullivan.
Present.
Mr. Contempasis. And
Present.
Ms. Grassa, I noted that you were here.
Thank you, present. I'm here. Sorry, I'm late.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are pleased to be offering live simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, Haitian Creole, Cape Verdean,
نحن
Portuguese,
سعيدين بأنه
Cantonese,
عندنا ترجمة
Mandarin, Vietnamese, Somali, Arabic, and American Sign Language. After I finish introducing the interpreters, we will activate the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen. Click the icon to select your language preference. Our Cantonese interpreter this evening is Anna Tsay. Will you please give your instructions in Cantonese?
Thank you, Mr. Contempasis。大家好，星期五下午好。今日咧歡迎大家咧，我同 Terry 咧會為大家係呢個中文嘅同步翻譯嘅。我咧就負責廣東話嘅部分。咁一陣間你見到個地球儀嘅時候咧，咁你撳落去嘅地球嗰度揀 Chinese，咁會成功進入咗廣東話嘅翻譯頻道噶啦。如果你用手機嘅話咧，麻煩你咧就要撳點撳落去，就有更多顯示。咁咧就揀 Chinese 就會成功進入到廣東話嘅翻譯頻道噶啦。Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our Mandarin interpreter is Terry Yin. Please give the Zoom instructions in Mandarin, please.
Thank you. 大家好，我的名叫 Terry， 我是你们的普通话翻译。待会你会在屏幕下方呢看到一个地球仪的图标，你点一下地球仪的图标，选择 Mandarin， 你就可以进入到普通话的翻译了。如果你是用手机或者 iPad 上网的话呢，你可以选择3个点。再点这个翻译哈，然后你就可以选择到普通话的翻译了。好，谢谢大家。Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Our Vietnamese interpreter is Duyen Tru. Please give the instructions.
Yeah, good afternoon. I will be the Vietnamese interpreter for the meeting tonight. Xin chào các anh chị có cần thông dịch tiếng Việt xin bấm vào quả cầu chọn ngôn ngữ tiếng Việt. Thì Duyên sẽ cung cấp thông dịch liên tục cho các anh chị. Thank you.
Thank you. Our Spanish interpreter is Randolph Dominguez. Mr. Dominguez.
Good evening, Mr. Contempasis. Good evening, all the people here on this meeting. Muy buenas tardes, damas y caballeros. Mi nombre es Randolph Domínguez. Voy a ser su intérprete del idioma español de manera simultánea. Si ustedes quieren escuchar esta reunión simultáneamente, por favor, en la parte inferior de su globo, en la parte inferior de su pantalla van a encontrar un globo terráqueo. Allí van a pulsar y van a seleccionar el idioma español. Si están utilizando un celular, van a buscar los 3 puntos a la mano superior derecha de su pantalla. Allí presionan y podrán escuchar la interpretación en español. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our Portuguese interpreter this evening is Christiane Leitner.
Olá, boa noite. Se você precisa escutar essa reunião em português brasileiro, você pode acessar o canal clicando no globo na parte inferior da tela, escolhendo o português. Se você estiver usando um celular, você precisa clicar nos 3 pontinhos na parte superior direita da tela do seu celular e passar adiante e escolher o canal Português Brasileiro. Obrigada.
Thank you. Our Cape Verdean interpreter is Carissa Demora. Please give your instructions.
Hello, today I will be interpreting in Creole. Meu nome é Carissa, hoje a gente vai fazer interpretação na crioulo. E se você tem acesso à interpretação na crioulo e você usa móvel, tem 2 opções na baixo, que você coloca crioulo, e se você usa computador também, tá sendo uma opção lá de baixo, lá, para você pressionar na crioulo.
Thank you. Our Haitian Creole interpreter is Sergio Saint-Hilaire.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Sergio Saint-Hilaire, Haitian Creole interpreter. C'est un plaisir nous gagner aujourd'hui encore pour nous avec vous, pour nous interpréter pour vous et pour nous faire connaître tout ça qui a passé dans ces séance. Et nous faut connaître que c'est dans ce channel français à nous, si vous besoin entrer là-dedans, ou cliquer en bas article comme là, ou après un globe et puis ou entrer dans la conversation pour parler avec nous. Tout ça besoin pour dire, ou dire et n'a traduit pour vous. Noto, bonne écoute, bon travail. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Our Arabic interpreter is Gada Siddiq.
Good evening. This is Gada Siddiq, the Arabic interpreter. مرحبا بكم. معكم المترجمة غادة صديق. سيتم ترجمة هذا اللقاء باللغة العربية. إذا أردتم أن تضغطوا على إشارة الكرة الأرضية في أسفل الشاشة ليتم توصيلكم إلى هذه الخدمة. وشكرا. Thank you.
Thank you. Our Somali interpreter is Camilla Fartoon Jamal. Please give the instructions.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Camilla Fartoon Jamal. I'm going to be your interpreter for Somali today. Magacayga waa Camilla Fartoon. Waxaa idin ahay tarjumanihiina qaybta Soomaaliga. Marka wixii isbuuci hore shirkii todobadii bishii May shirkii wixii dhacay gadaal loo fiirinaya laga hadlaya. Marka qolka Soomaaliga aad iga helaysaan kusoo dhawaada. Welcome.
Thank you. We also have American Sign Language interpreters, Erin Foley and Celia Michel. Thank you for all for assisting us this evening. I'd like to remind, we will now activate. I'm sorry, we're getting something here, Ms. Parvik.
Yes, sorry. Sergio, please go to your channel. Thank you.
We will now activate the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen. I'd like to remind everyone to speak at a slower pace to assist our interpreters. And thank you all for being here. We'll move on now to the approval of minutes from the May 7th, 2021 student listening. No, that's not correct. The approval of the minutes of the May 7th meeting, is that correct? Ms. Parvik?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented. May I have a
I so
motion?
move.
Is
I
there a
so move.
second? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or objection to the motion? Ms. Parvik, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Acevedo,
Aye.
Ms. Aguirre, Mr. Chernow, Mr. Kreger,
Aye.
Dr. Freeman Wisdom, Ms. Grassa,
Aye.
Ms. Lam,
Aye.
Ms. Nagasawa,
Aye.
Ms. Garrett,
Aye.
Dr. Tang,
Aye.
Ms. Sullivan,
Aye.
Mr. Contampasses.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 4 on the agenda is review of data from the Boston Public Schools. Before we do that, I'd ask Ms. Sullivan, the co-chair, if she has any information she'd like to share with us this evening?
No, not at this time.
Okay, are either Ms. Roberts and or Ms. Hogan available? Ms. Roberts, are you starting the discussion for item 4?
Yes, Mr. Contenpasis, I am, and Monica Hogan will be assisting me, and she's also going to help me by driving the slides.
Thank you.
So good evening, task force members and members of our public. Tonight, we're going to share some of the data requests that came in from our, I believe, last 2 meetings. I do want to start by saying that there are some data requests that we're still working on. So we will hope to have those at the next meeting of this body. I also want to apologize up front that you do not have these slides in advance. This week has been a busy week for our Office of Data and Accountability. So we were working on multiple data projects at the same time. So with that, I am going to go into our slides. This first slide looks at our historical applicant pool and those that received invitations by school type for both grades 7 and grades 9. This looks at a 4-year period, starting with the 2018-2019 school year process through the process for this school year. So if we start with our top table, you will see that in the 2018-2019 school year, we had a total of 2,138 applicants, and that went down in the following year and significantly up in the year after in 2020 and 2021, likely due to the implementation of school-based testing. And then for this school year, we see the drop to 1,666 applicants. We can see that the percentage of BPS student applicants was higher for the 2020 and 2021 school year. And for this school year's process, it went up a bit as well for the 7th grade. For the 9th grade, you can also see the same numbers in terms of in 2018 and 2019 school year, we had 1,440 applicants. For this school year, we had 760 applicants. However, in terms of the percentage of BPS students that made up the applicant pool, for this school year, you see that 81% of the applicant pool is made up of BPS students. We're going to now go to the invitation table below. Again, invitations reflect how many students are actually invited to have a seat at the 3 exam schools. So in the 2018-2019 school year, we invited 1,077 students to attend an exam school. That number went down last school year, and then again this school year, you see we have 974 students invited to attend the 7th grade at one of the exam schools. For the 9th grade, in 2018-2019, 453 students were invited to attend an exam school. You go down to this school year, you see 340 students were invited. And you can see that the percentage of BPS students as you look across both 7th and 9th grade increased significantly from the 18-19 school year to the school year process, being 74% for 7th grade and 77% for 9th grade. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about the invitations by exam school. So as we look at sending school type to the 3 exam schools, the sending schools, the darkest color being BPS schools, the then kind of periwinkle blue being charter, and then the light blue being private, parochial, and MECO students. You can see from last school year to this school year, as we just talked about, that the percentage of BPS students increased significantly in terms of invitations. That for BLA, was about a 15% increase for BPS students. Conversely, the charter and private parochial MECO percentages went down to about 20%. BLS remained the same for BPS student invitations. However, we did see an increase in charter school student invites and a slight decline in the private parochial MECO invites. And then for the O'Brien, we also saw a 12% increase in the BPS student invitation pool, with the total of charter, private parochial, and MECO being 13%. Next slide, please. We walk through the same data by 9th grade, just give you a little time to look at the slides. Again, BLA saw an increase in terms of BPS student enrollment, up about 12% as compared to the prior year. You can see that there was a slight decline in a charter enrollment and a larger decline of 9% of private parochial MECO. Here for BLS, there was a significant jump in terms of the percentage of BPS students invited to the 9th grade, with a 23% increase. You can also see that the private parochial MECO bucket went down a bit there. And then lastly, for Bryant, you also see here that there was a significant increase in the percentage of BPS students invited to the school. Next slide, please. So we're now going to look at invitations by school and race, first for 7th grade, and then we will turn to 9th grade. So just starting with Boston Latin Academy, we can see that their student population increased the most among their Black student population, going from 16% to 30%, followed by a slight increase in the Latinx student population. And those were, conversely, you saw a decrease in your white student population, followed by a slight increase of decrease of 3% in your Asian American student population. For BLS, you also see similarly a significant increase in the Black student population from 6% to 17%, a slight increase for the Latinx population from 12% to 15%, so a 3% increase. And then conversely, you see a decline in our white student population of about 12%, and our Asian American student population of about 3%. Our students categorized that as other also went up just a tad for both BLA and BLS. Lastly, for O'Brien, the bigger increase in enrollment is among our white student population there. So there was a 6% increase there, but a 2% decrease among our Latinx students, a 1% increase for our Black students, and then we see a 7% decrease for our Asian student population. Students classified who we classified as other had a 1% increase here as well. Next slide, please.
Actually, I'm sorry. Monica, would you mind just holding the slide for a minute?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll walk through the data by 9th grade. Again, for BLA, here the greatest increase in terms of the student population was among our Latinx students. That went from 35% to 43%. The enrollment of Black students stayed approximately the same, as well as our white students. There was just a 1% decrease. We saw the greatest decline here with our Asian student population of 8%. For BLS, the greatest increase here is for our Latinx student population from 17% to 34%, so almost double. We see a slight increase for our Black student population, a slight decline of 7% for our white student population, and from 24 to 12% for our Asian student population. So that would be a 12 percentage point decrease. And then when we go over to Orion, we see that there's an increase in our Latinx student population from 35% to 46%, a decline in our Black student population from 35 to 29%, as well as a decline in our Asian student population from 18% to 12%. There is a slight increase in our white student population by 1% here, and as well as our students who we've categorized as other. I'll give you all a minute to look at that slide before we move on. Okay, next slide, please. Before I move on to the invitations by 20% and 80%, just want to see if there were any questions about the slides we just covered. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, Mr. Prager. Oh, I see a couple.
Maybe this doesn't directly address the limit of the question, but I'm very curious about data by socioeconomic and neighborhood. Is that data that we have available to us tonight?
We do have some neighborhood data. I am Miss Hogan. I don't think we have the socioeconomic data tonight, do we?
I don't. The original socioeconomic slide from last week is in here, but I don't think the additional socioeconomic data is in this deck tonight.
All right. And then the other follow-up question I have is, given the fluctuation that we see, even looking at BPS versus non-BPS invitations, when looking at a prior 3-year average, would you be able to share with us this year's invitation data compared to a 3-year average at another date?
To clarify, Mr. Kreger, you mean by the demographics?
Sure.
Is
Yes. By race, by socioeconomic status, by neighborhood, given the charge that we have as a task force.
We will add it to the list.
Thank you. And I know that you have a big list in front of you, and I'm grateful for the help.
And this is Ms. Sullivan. We are going to, at the end of this session, kind of walk through the outstanding data requests so that we can ensure that we are all on the same page and that all of the requests that have been made specifically as it relates to the socioeconomic, Mr. Kreger, as you referenced, the socioeconomic data, the neighborhood data that we've asked for, all with a historical lens, that we have that is being appropriately prioritized, so that it can be shared with this body to help inform our decision making. So that we will kind of review the list to make sure both the list that was running since last week, as well as any new data requests that come from today.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Garrett and then Ms. Lum had their hands up.
Yes, thank you. Mine was fast. Just wanted to, a point of clarification that these are invitee, this is invitee data, which can be slightly different from enrollment data. And I flagged it because when I looked at my own data as a school, I didn't recognize some of the proportionality. For example, our current 7th grade class is not 50% white because there was a higher level of not accepting seats from white students. So it's actually 45% white. So I just wanted to distinguish between this being the invitees, but our process of over inviting sometimes does change proportionality. So we would not actually know the true composition of the enrolled class until September, though this is of course very predictive. But I just wanted to mention that in case anyone notices a difference between the numbers that we're looking at for invitees and numbers that folks might see on DESE websites or other places that have our school's demographics included.
Thank you for that clarification. Ms. Lum?
Thank you. I actually am piggybacking on that same observation and wondering if we have historic acceptance rates to compare to the actual invitee rates, so we can see where, to what point this task force actually might have a modicum of purview, and where things actually then become part of the family's decision-making and not the task force decision-making.
Yeah, we will add that. So you're looking for the historical yield from applicant to invitation. Invitation, sorry, to applicant, yes. Sorry.
Invitation from, yeah, so adding enrolled to
Yeah,
the data in
yeah.
addition to the applicant and invitation pools.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions there, I'm going to move forward. We have quite a few slides tonight, so we'll try to pause in between, but do want to get it through as many as we can. We're going to move forward looking at invitations by the 20% and 80% rounds. So first, we're going to look by sending school type. Again, here, the darkest blue is BPS student. The periwinkle sort of blue is charter, and then the light or baby blue is private, parochial, and METCO. So for 7th grade, you'll see that in the 20% pool, 73% of invitees were BPS students, followed by 21% from private, parochial, and METCO programs, and then 7% by charter. For the 80%, the BPS student invitations was about the same at 74%. The private, parochial, and METCO was 18%, and then 8% for a charter. For our 9th grade invitation pool, you'll see that there's a higher increase for BPS students in the 20% pool, with 81% of the invitees being BPS students. We see that there is a flip there between the parochial, private, and METCO and the charter, with the charter invitations being 12%, and then the private, parochial, and METCO being 7%. For the 80%, 76% are BPS students who were invited, followed by 15% being private parochial and METCO, and 10% being our charter school students. Next slide, please. So here we're going to look at invitations distributed by race for the 20% and 80% 7th grade and then 8th grade. So for the 7th grade, the majority of our 20% seats, 46% went to white students, followed by 18% to Latinx students, and then 15% to Asian students, 14% to Black students, and then 7% to students who we've classified as identified here as other. Within the 80% pool, 27% of the invitations went to white students, followed by 25% going to Black students, and 24% going to Latinx students, and then 18% going to Asian students, and 5% to those we've identified here as other. Go over to our 9th grade, we can see that in the 20%, 46% of invitees were Latinx, 33% were Black, and 18% Asian. And I cannot read that first number, I think it says 8%, but I might be wrong. So I'll ask Ms. Hogan to correct me if I'm wrong. Are white students. Just trying to do my math real quick too in my head. See, Ms. Sullivan, are you doing the same?
I'm trying.
I believe it's a 3, Miss Roberts.
Thank you. Ms.
It's covered up by the 0, so that's why it's.
Okay. And then we're going to move to the 18%. We see that 43% of the invitations went to Latinx students, 26% to Black students, 17% to white students, 11% of the invitees were Asian, and then 3% classified here as other. I'll give you another minute to take a look at the slide before we move forward. Okay, I think we're okay to move forward, Ms. Hogan?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, now we're gonna look at zip codes. You all asked about geographic distribution. So these are 7th grade invitations distributed within the 20 and 80% by zip code. For each zip code, you can see how many invites were a part of the 20% versus the 80%. I'm not going to try to read this slide to you, but I will give you time to take a look at it here at your leisure. I will note that in the 20%, the highest percentage of seats is in West Roxbury. For the 80%, I believe it is the Dorchester with the 02124 zip code. I think Ms. Garrett has her hand raised.
So Robertson, just flagging that the columns with 0% can still have students, yet it's just decimal points so small percentage wise that it's reflecting as 0.
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so if you look at all invitees, the number, or within the 20% or 80%, you can see how many students were actually invited. You may look in the percentage column and see a 0%. So we will take, for example,
First Beacon Hill, first line, 80%.
Thank you. Yes. So in the 80%, you'll see that there are 3 students, but it says that it's 0% of the overall. It's just because of how small of a percentage it is.
Ms. Roberts, I think, okay, there, I'm sorry. I was going to ask about our students in DCF custody and those impacted by housing fragility, but I see them. I see the zip code at the bottom. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna move to the same slide for the 9th grade. Give you a few minutes to look there. Same concept applies. Here, I believe Mattapan is the area with the highest percentage of invitations under the 20%.
Dorchester, 02124.
Did I miss that? 02124 is 15%. Mattapan is 16%.
I'm sorry, I was under all invites. I apologize.
No worries. And then if we look at the 80%, it is 02124 at 12%.
And this is for this year. So the historical, kind of the look back with respect to the geographic diversity that is forthcoming, right? We don't have that today.
I think in our next set of slides, we're going to do
perfect.
Last year,
Yeah.
this year.
Excellent, thank you.
Because there was no 20% and 80% the year before, wanted to show this separately before showing the historical comparison.
Excellent, thank you.
Are there any questions about the slides we just reviewed? The next set of slides, as Ms. Hogan just said, will be comparing last school year to this year by for invitations by neighborhood. Okay. There being none, we can move forward, Ms. Hogan. So we are looking at the 7th grade invitations for last school year's process and this school year's process by zip code. So under 2021, you will see the number and then the percentage. You can see that for 2021, 13% of invitations, the highest percentage went to West Roxbury. For last school year, again, there DCF and homeless as a zip code was not used for last school year because that was just not something that we did prior to this one-year policy. And then you see for this school year's process, that the highest percentage is for Dorchester 02124. All right, we're going to move on to the next.
Quick question, Ms. Roberts. So with respect to our homeless students, students in DCF custody and our students who are impacted by housing fragility, the homeless / DCF category at the bottom. So are we unable to assess their access to the exam schools in school year 2021?
No, I think in the previous slide, and Ms. Hogan might be able to find the number for me. We did share the number of students who were homeless. I don't think we did DCF custody in that slide, but we can probably get that number. It just would have been, those numbers would be distributed on this slide across the zip codes, but we can identify the total number.
Yeah, the total number is in one of the slides in this deck. But for last year's data, those students are included in the zip code that we had on file at the time.
Okay, so
We didn't pull them into a separate group, I guess is the.
Yeah, I think I've maybe have that data for students experiencing homelessness and in DCF care. It increased from 29 students last year to 73 total this school year.
73 or 53?
73, this is 7th grade, and then the next slide will be 9th grade. So the numbers I just gave you
Got it.
are total.
Okay, so it would be helpful if to know for certain what the number is for, again, very interested in the increased access, as so it appears, for students who are in DCF custody and those who are impacted by housing fragility. So that would be helpful.
Okay, so we break down to 29 by grade for those. Okay.
Thank you.
Next slide, please, Ms. Hogan. Thank you. So here's the same data. Again, invitations distributed for last school year and the school year by zip code. You'll see for 9th grade. You will see that the highest percentage here for last school year was 02124, Dorchester with 11%. And this year, it is also Dorchester 02124. Okay,
Thank you.
we can move to the next slide. So now we're going to turn to our English learners and students with disabilities. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So here we're going to look at the invitations for grade 7 on the left side, and then grade 9 by English learner development level. Sorry, English language development level. And for when we look at ELD level, ELD 1 is the lowest English language development level, and then 5 is the highest. So this is a 2-year look from last school year to this school year numerically and by percentage. You'll see for grade 7 that for last year and this school year, the greatest increase is in ELD level 4, with going from 1 student across the schools to 45 invitations for grade 7. And for grade 9, you'll see that there is a slight increase numerically for ELD level 4, but if you look percentage wise, you'll see that the shifts reflect a little bit differently. Okay. And actually for grade 9, ELD 5 has the greatest percentage increase. Next slide, please. Okay. We're going to now look at students with disabilities by setting. And so when we think about setting, we are thinking about the minutes of service and the location of service. So when we look at substantially separate classrooms, these are students receiving 60% or more of their instruction outside of a general education classroom. Inclusion, classrooms are students who are receiving the majority of their education in a gen ed classroom. And then under resources and related services, those may be services provided in or outside of a classroom to support a student. And so for 7th grade, we see that the greatest percentage increase in terms of invitations is for our inclusion students who are being served in an inclusion setting. And that there's a slight numerical increase in those receiving related resource and related services, as well as in substantially separate settings. And then for the 9th grade, you'll see that we have 22% of the students invited for this year are in a substantially separate classroom setting. That for inclusion, 17% compared to 0% last year. For our students receiving resource-related services, that there's a slight increase representing 6% of students with disabilities invited. I see Mr. Contapasos has his hand raised.
Yeah, this is great data, Ms. Roberts and Ms. Hogan, a lot of work. My question is, in preparation for the summer workshops that are going to occur, the summer sessions for students, once the enrollees in these categories are identified in each school, will the schools at that time have the individual IEPs for the students that have enrolled?
So our schools currently have their roster, and our Office of Special Education is starting working with them to provide information on the students. We are assuming that all of the students are going to come, so we're preparing for all of them, both for the spring program that is starting in June, and then our school leaders are working with our Office of Strategy and Equity for the summer program. And then we've started to think about what the school year supports look like for all of our students. But yes, they will have the students' individual education plan, we say IEP just for our broader audience, to be able to make sure we provide the services that students require.
Thank you.
Ms. Aguirre?
Yeah, wondering about the same lines. I think that typically students who are like ELD level 1 and 2, most likely they are in like SCI classrooms. And as far as I know, I don't know, I mean, I wonder if the exam schools are gonna have like SCI classrooms. How are they gonna be getting the resources for helping and for supporting these students?
So and welcome our exam school leaders who are on to provide any additional information besides what I'm providing. Our Office of English Language Learners, or Office of English Learners, is currently working with our exam schools and our chief of schools to begin thinking about the services that will be needed for our English learner students who will be coming in. That will include looking at staffing and supports around curriculum or professional development. So that work is currently in progress.
Ms. Roberts, I actually want to follow up on that question. So I have two questions. One is this is excellent information and exciting to see. access for students who have historically not had this type of access to our exam schools. So exciting to see. That said, do we have coming in future slides kind of a distribution across each of the exam schools? So will we be able to see kind of where students have been invited to attend with respect to each of the exam schools? So that's one. And then the second is, again, following up on Ms. Aguirre's question. So all Boston Public Schools should have the supports in place to support all students. So are we saying that the exam schools do not have the supports in place currently to support students with disabilities and ELs? Or are we saying that those supports may need to be increased?
I'm going to ask Ms. Hogan to start with the first question. I don't believe we have this data by exam school here. Do we, Ms. Hogan?
I don't think that's in today's slides. We do have to be mindful of how big the groups of students are as we begin disaggregating the data further.
Okay.
So we can definitely revisit and see what we're able to provide there.
Thank you.
Okay. And then for the second question, and definitely I welcome the exam school leaders to share additional information. One of the things that our Office of English Learners and Office of Special Education will be doing with our school leaders is, again, looking at the needs of students. There may be cases where students have needs or there may be a student need type that is not currently present in a school. And so we would then move to make sure that we are providing those services, which is what we are required to do for our students. And that would not just be for the exam schools, that's, happens across BPS as some schools may have more robust programming. For example, there are a few of our schools that have really strong autism programs, but that doesn't mean a student on a spectrum might not go to another school and still be provided the services they need.
Great. Oops, great. Thank you. And I think Ms. Grass's hand is up next.
Yeah.
Tanisha, I think you asked a similar question to me. I think I will just add that due to the increase of numbers, while there may be some staffing at these 3 schools right now to support ELs and students with disabilities, because the numbers have increased so much, I would say there would need to be an increase of staffing in order to meet students' IEPs. So when you just think about a teacher's caseload and how much they can service, also to support that. I do have a question about students in substantially separate programming. Are we saying that we're having substantially separate classrooms at exam schools, or are we saying that students will be included? I think.
Yeah, so that is a question that I actually cannot answer for you right now, Ms. Grassa, but thank you for raising it. We will add that and also speak with our Assistant Superintendent of Special Education, who is just on the beginning of this process with our exam school leaders, since we recently sent out the invitations. I don't know, Ms. Scarrett, if he's yet talked about more specific about what that might look like yet, but my understanding is that they're at the beginning of that process.
Yes, not.
Because, for example, one thing that concerns me is that I'm assuming there's a distribution of kids at different schools. So if one child is in 7th grade and has a substantially separate IEP, that would not be a fitting educational environment for a child to be learning alone in a room by themselves. nor would 4 kids probably feel appropriate in such a setting. So just curious what kind of supports and staffing we'll be doing for those students to be successful in the transition.
Thank you. Mr. Contenpassis and then Mr. Kreger.
Nope, I'm sorry, I took my hand down.
Okay, Mr. Kreger.
Just only to Principal Grass's point, and I know this was implied in her remarks, but each of those determinations ultimately have to be individualized per the student's IEP itself. Right? So I did just want to note that for the record.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Contenpassis?
No.
Okay. We're gonna go to the next slide unless there are questions. Now we're gonna start looking at sending school. You can, thank you. I am not gonna read all of these, but this slide looks at the specific school sending students for this. Let me back up. This slide looks at 7th grade invitations by their current home school with the specific school. So we're not looking at type here, we're looking at specific schools, and we're looking at the number of seats in terms of the decline. So if we look at the first column, these are schools that had a decline of anywhere from 10 to 12 seats. So the Boston Teachers Union K-8 school, for example, in terms of the number of invitations that would have gone to that school.
Ms. Roberts, I just want to clarify real quick.
Thank you.
The 12 is the number of schools in the list.
Thank you. My apologies. So a decline of 10 or more seats then, Ms. Hogan, correct?
Yes. And
Okay.
so the number in parentheses for each section is the number of schools in that group.
Okay. Thank you. Followed by the number of schools that had from 5 to 9, saw a decline of 5 to 9 invitations. We said seats, but I'm gonna say invitations. And then the last column, schools that saw a decline of 5 or less invitations. I see Ms. Tung has her hand raised. Tung.
Hi. So can I assume that there are, since there are 28 plus 29, 57 schools listed here, that about 40 had increases in offers?
That is the next slide, Dr. Tung.
Yeah.
And then my next request would be that in the next iteration of this slide, for the BPS schools, can you put the OI of the school, the opportunity index of the school in parentheses?
Yes, and that's part of your, one of your requests from Tuesday. That is still on the list that we're working through with the, I believe it was also MCAS scores and one other item.
Thank you, Ms. Hogan. I thought I saw Mr. Guerre with her. Did you have your hand up?
No, that clarified my question. Thank you.
Okay. If we are ready, we will move to those that had an increase in seats. And I'm going to apologize. We have this only for 7th grade. We don't have this for 9th grade today. So these are the schools with students who have either the same number of invitations or an increase of invitations. So your first column, there are 8 schools where they have the same number of invitations from last year to this year. The next set of schools, 37, had an increase of 1 to 5 seats from last year to this year. In column 4, these are schools that had an increase of 5 to 9 seats, so probably 6 to 9. There are 14 of those. And then the last column, those are schools that had an increase of 10 invitations. And I apologize, I said seats. These are invitations. And I see Ms. Grassa, you have your hand up, followed by Ms. Garrett.
I don't see my school on either of these slides, although it is Friday evening and I may be tired and have missed it. So is this inclusive of all schools?
It should be, Ms. Grassa, and I apologize for that oversight, and I will make sure it is updated before we send out these slides to you all.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there are other schools that are missing too.
Yep, I will double check before we share this out.
I believe I saw Ms. Garrett, then Mr. Kreger, and then Mr. Contemplacious.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I believe that Harvard Kent, this is the first year that they have a 6th grade. Is that, do I have that right?
That is true, and it is also true for a number of other K-5s in Boston that have become K-6s this year.
It might be helpful to have them as asterisks because they had 0 before. So just to kind of separate them into a different category. So if they just had a symbol or something, since they're just coming online.
Yeah. We can make that adjustment as well.
Thank you. Mr. Kreger.
Very quickly, in the column for increases of 5 to 9 seats, there's a line that says other private parochial. Does that mean that there are schools that aren't on this list that are meant to be captured in a catch-all there? Or I guess, what does that other private parochial mean?
That is a coding in our data system, and so I will look into that. I thought we had that removed from this analysis, so I will double check.
Cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Contemplacious?
May we also receive a list of any BPS school that did not have a successful invitee to the 3 exam schools?
Okay. We can provide that. I think Ms. Hogan, if we're going to look at that, we might have to also see for those schools if they had any applicants.
Yeah.
Okay. If there are no additional questions, we will go to the next set of slides. And so we'll be looking at school ranking data, how students and families chose to rank schools. This first slide looks at the students ranking of the exam schools by first choice for 7th grade. So by zip code. So you can start with just, for example, and then I'll let you all look at it. In 02111 in the Chinatown neighborhood, there were 33 applicants. 81.8% of them ranked BLS first, 12.1% ranked BLA first, and 6.1% ranked O'Brien first. So I'll let you all look at the slide with that information for a minute. Any questions about the slide? Okay, we're ready, move to the next slide. So we look at first choice rankings by race for 7th grade again. So in the first column is by race. And you can then see the total number of applicants, followed by the percentage of those applicants that ranked BLS first, and BLA first, and then O'Brien first. So for our applicants identifying as Asian, there were a total of 280, 77.1% ranked BLS first, 13.2% ranked BLA first, and 9.6% ranked O'Brien first. Any questions about this slide? There being none, I think we can move forward, Ms. Hogan.
Not a question, but a comment. If we could go back to the previous slide, Ms. Roberts. This is actually a phenomenon that we encountered with this summer's working group. And just would love the input of those who have joined the task force since then. But as of course, Boston Latin School under all categories gets the highest percentages for of those ranked first. But interestingly, among Black and Latino students, do you see that the percentages of those who rank BLA and O'Brien first? Actually, it's actually pretty impressive. That among Black and Latinx students and multi-race students, well, Black and Latinx students in particular, many Black and Latino families would elect to send their child to BLA or O'Brien as their first choice. And there's a lot there, including perceptions and culture and so on. But that's an interesting demographic to chew on as we consider what equity means.
Thank you, Ms. Acevedo.
In other words, perhaps equity means making sure that Black and Latino families have increased choice, right? Increased opportunities to choose their preference. But I'm wondering, if they were given the preference, would we necessarily see more Black and Latino families in Boston Latin School?
Thank you. There are no more questions or comments. We can move to the next slide. And then, so we're gonna look at the same data for ninth grade. I'm not gonna walk you through the table again, because we already did that, but I will give you a minute to take a look. Any questions on this slide? Okay, gonna move forward to the next slide, Ms. Hogan, which again shows the data by race. And I do, to Mr. Acevedo's earlier point, I think these numbers in many ways are a little bit more evenly distributed across the 3 schools for grade 9. Okay. Any questions or comments on this slide? I think we have maybe 8 slides to go. Oh, okay, these are slides we previously shared, so I don't think we need to go through those. Maybe this is a good time to pause and see if there are any questions and turn it back over to our co-chairs.
Ms. Roberts, before we do that, I think, Ms. Sullivan, this slide might answer some of the question you had earlier around the change in homeless students and students in the care of DCF. So just wanted to pull that up real quick.
Oh, this is great. Thank you. Let's see.
So this is the one in the aggregate, but where we went from 29 invitations last year to 73 this year. So I believe 53 of those were for grade 7 for this year and 20 for grade 9 for this year.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much for pulling this up. You know, it will be critically important, and I mean, I know we've discussed it generally speaking, but I want to lift this up again, that as we're thinking about what supports look like, remembering that part of the recommendation of the working group last summer was, you know, to have supports available for all students leading into this next school year, that we are intentional about identifying what supports may be needed with respect to, you know, an acknowledgement that there will be greater socioeconomic diversity within these schools in the upcoming year, and making sure that we're intentional in our design with respect to the unique supports that students in the care of DCF and those who are impacted by housing fragility and homelessness may need.
Thank you.
If this is, that was super helpful. Thank you so much. I do want to make sure that we take a moment before moving to additional discussion to review our outstanding data requests, both those, what's on the list from previous meetings and also what has been added as of today, just to make sure that we are all on the same page about what's been requested. That will enable us to prioritize what the task force needs in order to do its work in the short term, and also to identify what additional supports BPS may need in order to respond to those requests. So I think the most efficient way to handle that, it would be for BPS to share with us your understanding of the outstanding data requests from members of the task force. And then we can, we'll just in an orderly way, we'll go around if folks have additions or clarifications.
So then would you like me to do that one?
Want to start? I can. Got a couple notes written down. So.
Okay, so I will start with the ones that we did not share today, and Ms. Hogan, I think, has been tracking the ones from today. So I believe invitations by SCS distribution and zip code. English learner data by home language over the last 3 years. Invitation by feeder school and race in terms of by exam school. Invitation over the last 3 years, invitations over the last 3 years, 2 to 3 years by neighborhood, including zip school type. Did we do that one today, Ms. Hogan?
Invitations,
By neighborhood.
code and school type? No.
Okay. Thank you. So my list is correct. And then acceptance over the last 3 years by zip code and including school type. There was, we wanted data on whether there are zip codes where there are higher grades are concentrated or more common. And then if so, the breakout between the 20% and 80% seat distribution.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that,
Yeah.
please?
There was a request to determine whether there are zip codes where there are higher grades, so higher GPAs, are concentrated or more common. And then if so, the breakout of that in terms of invitations between a 20% and an 80%. And the last item I have is the OI score for the home school or sending schools. And then connecting that to the exam schools that they ranked. And ideally looking at that for last school year and this school year.
Can I just ask for clarification on, so invitation by neighborhood and school type, do you have, is that, I'm not sure I understand the request. So I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, so by neighborhood or zip code and including charter, parochial, private, so BPS.
Okay, great. So that's the list that you have that from previous requests, right? Okay, so let's pause for a moment. Is anything missing from requests that task force members asked for previously? Dr. Tung.
Well, it was missing from what Ms. Roberts just read, but not from what Ms. Hogan referred to earlier in this meeting around MCAS proficiency rates.
So can you clarify, can you restate the request so that we can make sure that it is on the outstanding list?
Just to add for the sending schools, the disaggregated proficiency rates for the sending schools.
Great. So it's the OI and the MCAS. Thank you. Anyone else?
There were some additional requests from Tuesday.
Okay.
If you'd like me to go through those as well. So there was a request for additional information on the weights within the Opportunity Index. And then Dr. Tung's request that we just talked about. On Tuesday, we looked at schools in Boston by the percentage of economically disadvantaged students they have. And there was a request to know what the grade configuration of those schools is. So K to 5, K to 8, 6 to 8.
I'm sorry, can you, so what is that data request? Just I'm not sure.
Yep, so we looked at the number of schools in Boston by the percentage of economically disadvantaged students they have. And so the request was to know, I think the goal behind the request was our economically disadvantaged students a higher percentage in a school that's a 6 to 8 versus a K to 6 versus a K to 8. Does that make sense?
Ms. Hogan, if I can paraphrase what I think I heard is there a higher concentration of students with a lower socioeconomic status in a particular school type?
That was my understanding of the request that I wrote down.
So if this was your request and you're on the line, can you verify that that the understanding of the request is correct? Ms. Garrett, we cannot hear you. No. Oh, it wasn't yours. I can read your lips on that. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, we'll figure out whose request it is and just make sure that we're clear on, yes, Ms. Garrett, go ahead. Oh, okay. Okay. We'll clear, and just to make sure that, because we don't want you to be off doing work and it's not on point with what the request is.
Thank you.
Okay, so that one we'll come back to. Dr. Tung.
I've got my list isn't done yet, Ms. Sullivan. If you
want
to continue.
Okay, sorry.
There was a request to better understand what the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education collects on data for our private schools, particularly in terms of achievement. There was a request for the tiering map of the city of Boston to superimpose our BPS schools on top of the tiers. As well as to better understand what prompted the changes in Chicago's tiering model, where they added information on school performance into their tiering system. And then there were a few edits to the sending school slides from tonight that we will change and highlight any BPS schools that did not have any invitations to exam schools. And I think we covered the rest of these.
So that was BPS schools with no invitations, BPS schools with no invitations. And then I think I also heard BPS schools with no invitations or an understanding of which the question, something about.
We added 6th grade in some schools and calling that out.
Well, no, if there are BPS among those who had 0 invitations, how many applications did they have? So we can see, like, if they had no invitations and they had no applicants, that's helpful to know. If they had 0 invitations and they had 50 applicants, that's helpful to know.
Okay, that's my list.
Thank you. Dr. Tung, anything missing at this point? And we can do additions in a moment.
The only missing one from today's conversation was Ms. Grassa asked, will there be substantially separate classrooms at exam schools?
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Anything missing for folks, whether it was your request or a request you remember someone else making? Yes, Ms. Aguirre.
Yeah, and also for the students who have like ELD 1-2, are they going to have SEI classrooms, or how are they going to be incorporated into the school?
Right. And actually, thank you so much for that, because I actually asked a question about for our students with disabilities. The question I had, the request I had was for students with disabilities and for ELs, where are they with respect to their invitations to specific exam schools? I would add to that students who were in 9999.
Can I also just add that English learners do not have to be in SEI if they're ELDs 1s and 2s. They just need the appropriate amount of ESL instruction, but they can be included for other content areas.
Great. Okay. Well, if there's, I think we're good. And we can talk about, we can, now that we have the list, we're better able to provide supports to BPS or request supports for BPS. Dr. Tung.
Is it time to make new requests?
Sure. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay. This one I'm offering to do the work. So one of my quirks is when I look at a slide, the way I know if I understand it is to be able to like say a sentence about the main takeaway. And that was very difficult to do today for the slides that had the zip codes. So 14, 15, 23, and 25 in particular, I'm thinking about. And, you know, zip code tells us something about geographic diversity and how that changed. And median family income of families with school-aged children in each zip code is a proxy for socioeconomic status. And so what I would like to know if we could have those tables in Excel and think and look for ways to summarize, you know, above or below median family income of families with children under school-aged children. That would get us closer to the summary sentence. Does that make sense? Like, I know what I would do if I had the stuff in Excel, but I don't want to make mistakes by copying everything myself.
So what I see are heads nodding. I'm just making, because that's not going to be captured. That's not captured by the interpreters. So
I know that Monica Hogan probably can visualize what I'm asking for. So either, you know, you can do it or I'm happy to do it.
Great. We can certainly provide those tables in Excel along with, I think, the school list with the OI scores and the MCAS data will be most user-friendly in a spreadsheet format and probably wouldn't fit on a slide anyway.
Thank you.
Great. I see Ms. Lum's hand and Mr. Kreger's hand. I want to just inform the task force that I actually need to leave the meeting unexpectedly. So I am leaving you in Mr. Contenpasis's capable hands. If someone can just, as he has indicated on his device, it can be difficult to see the panelist bar and hands raised. So if someone can just help with that, that'd be great.
Thank you. Ms. Lum?
Thank you. Just curious to know if there's some way to compare what our modeling over the summer from the working group looks like relative to the actual invitations outcomes, and how far off the mark were we, just to put some context as we think about recommendations moving forward.
Is there a way to, we did a lot of, as you remember, a lot of simulations. If there's a way to minimize that into a sort of simple way of getting that analogy, if you will, it would be helpful rather than taking a look at every simulation we ran.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to make more work, but if there's a way to look at the final models, I guess. And I don't know if that's by school, by zip code, it's a bit of a historical mix up in my head, but
we can compare the invitations to the final simulation that was used.
Mr. Krager?
Thank you. First of all, big thanks to both Monica Roberts and Monica Hogan for all of this information. I'm wondering if I've been spending time looking through the census tracts and the American Community Survey, and I think I just would like your help in boiling the information down better. And so that may be as simple as just providing one map that includes the actual census tract numbers to make it easier to track to the census tract data. But it could be spending more time with us as a group, walking through how best we can utilize this information as well. But I think I'm most curious about how and where we can see, for example, public housing in the census tracts, and how to make sense of the data that comes from each of those tracts. So it's not a very specific data request, but I'd like to maybe work with you both to figure out how we can have better access to that as a group.
Yeah, I think I have an idea of how we can help provide better access to that information, Mr. Krager.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Hogan, can the city be of some assistance there?
We can certainly reach out to our partners at BPDA to see what assistance they may be able to provide us.
Thank you. Dr. Tung?
I just wanted to say thank you so much to the two Monicas, because this meeting tells us so much about the temporary policy and how it worked. And we really needed that in order to engage in the discussion about the policy to come. It would have been impossible without some of this valuable data analysis. So thank you very much.
Yep, and thank you for saying that. They've been working on this stuff in between a number of other things that the district is currently dealing with, and it's above and beyond. So kudos to both of you and your staff, whatever that may look like. Let's see, Ms. Garrett? Can't hear you.
Oh, I think she said she put a comment in the chat since it's not working. Would you like me to read it, Mr. Contemplasis?
Please do.
Okay. My suggestion was going to be that if no one recalls that request, I think that was the one request that we needed clarity on, we should take it off the list. While an interesting wondering, I'm not sure how that data point is relevant to our purpose on this committee, and I'm concerned about the time devoted to gathering data and discussing it. While important, we also need time to propose new models. So if we can take anything off the plate in terms of data requests that don't seem as useful, I think we should.
Well said. Mr. Acevedo.
It's I have trouble translating this phrase. Ms. Aguirre will recognize it. no quiero llover sobre mojado. I don't want to just rain on top of ground that's already sufficiently wet. But I think it is important, you know, to just shower both Monicas with our thanks at grinding this. My concern now is, what do we do with these sumptuous treasures? And we have so much of this data and so little time to convert this to a policy. I know on my end, I feel a bit overwhelmed. Perhaps we can lay them out like jigsaw puzzle pieces, and they'll begin to tell us a story. Part of that story will also be to see what's happened in places like Detroit and Chicago. See what the judge has, you know, the courts have been whispering into our ears about what we got away with this summer. And don't even think about doing it again in the fall.
We don't
No,
we don't want to mention what we got away with.
Right. So those are the thoughts that go through my mind as I read this data. And we'll, of course, Mr. Contempasos will be looking to you and Ms. Sullivan to shepherd us into, you know, at some point, and we kind of experienced this last summer. Mr. Gregor and others on this, and Islam, others recall, and our team, our school leaders, at some point, we have to stop raking in data and say, this is what the data is telling us, and start determining directions. So yeah, it's you know, Mr. Contempasos, you have the unenviable task of you and Ms. Sullivan of, you know, setting that pace, but it's not like we have a lot of time.
No, I think, well, I thank you for that. I think both you and Ms. Garrett have made it perfectly clear that we can continue to ask for information. I, for one, would like to suggest that the data that we have seen, although we haven't seen the actual results of the enrollees, but you can't, I think, go away from this without recognizing that the work group really, in my mind, did a heck of a job in dealing with some very difficult issues. And I'd like to think that what I've seen this evening, as well as some of the earlier data, that progress has been made. And again, I think if I look at this, we have until June 9th, which is when the committee is expecting us to come forward with a recommendation. That's not a lot of time. And particularly if they're going to vote on this as they have tentatively planned on the 23rd. I believe that's the date in June of the last school committee in June, last school committee meeting in June. Just thinking about having listening sessions between the two committee meetings is something that, you know, we've talked about before. So I would like to suggest that moving forward, if we can get the data that's been requested this evening, that we spend the majority of our time looking at possible options that we can consider, which means that as we continue with our meetings, that they be focused on what individuals have seen, heard, and where they would like to at least offer suggestions as to how do we move this thing forward. I don't think we have the luxury of continuing to request information unless it has to do with a provision or a recommendation that comes out of this group that needs additional data, much like we ran the simulations last summer and fall. So we have reached a point where it's time to take everything and begin to think about how we offer what may well be, if necessary, improvements in what indeed we put forward last year. So I would like to suggest that beginning with the next meeting, that we devote our time to interpreting what we've heard, what we've seen, what the data has shown us, and coming up with some draft ideas, if you will. I don't want to call them recommendations, but ideas that might move this forward into some sort of set of recommendations that we can forward to the committee. I don't think we have the luxury of moving this through the months of July and August. And I would suggest very strongly that we cannot do that if indeed we're going to give the city and the students and the families in the city the opportunity to understand what the recommendations might be. So with that, Ms. Skerritt, I think you had your hand up.
I tested my microphone. Is it working now?
It is.
Okay, great. I just also wanted to lift up at the same time that we have such useful information from Ms. Houghton and Ms. Roberts, that we've received an incredible amount of data from public comment on the temporary system as it impacted the families who were most directly affected by this policy. I think it's really important that their individual experiences from their respective neighborhoods, school types, and preparation and journeys are considered as equally as we might have our own set beliefs about exam schools, assessments, meritocracies, rigor. I think we need to hear that. I think we've heard that the families in the city are looking for something that they can understand from year to year that doesn't require a dissertation to try to imagine how their child is going to get accepted to school. And we've also heard families share our passion for the importance of learning in a diverse environment. I think we need to start putting pen to paper to propose some models and talk about it, or else we are going to run out of time and everything that Mr. C just said. Thanks.
Well said. Dr. Tung?
I think that, well, I completely agree. We all want our summers. And so it's time to, as you say, start putting pen to paper. I think that today was the first time I felt ready to start talking about how to move forward, because we have a better understanding of what just happened. And I think for me, the one other conversation that I need to have, and it can probably be a 10-minute conversation, is just we need a working definition of rigor, because that's in our charge. And so yeah, I just wanted to make a plug for either doing that now or early in the next meeting. That would help me to participate most fully.
Well, Ms. Skerritt?
I think that's an important one, and I just wanted to know in preparation for that conversation. I think my understanding from the working group's charge before was that there is an assumption, or we're working off of a belief that the 3 exam schools are rigorous. So I'm wondering if that's what we are debating or discussing as we discuss the definition of rigor, or are we going in with that belief and just clarifying what encompasses that, or what defines the schools as being rigorous, or is the conversation to push the question of whether the schools are rigorous? And I guess I asked Dr. Tung because I think my original understanding of the charge was the idea that we are looking at an admissions policy that would allow the 3 schools to continue, that would preserve the current academic success that has, all 3 of them in the top 15 public schools in the state. So I think that was how rigor was intended to be used. And so I'm just in preparation for that conversation, trying to understand better what our discussion would be.
Great, yeah, so the charge says such that rigor is maintained. And so from what you just said, Ms. Garrett, that means so that they remain top schools in Massachusetts. And the measure for top is what? What are the outcomes that are being looked at to rank schools in Massachusetts?
I think the measure for the schools, as the external, is student outcomes and all of the same factors that our own Boston Public Schools use to determine whether a school is high performing or in transformation, or its student outcomes, its post-secondary results, its MCAS scores, its access to rigorous coursework, it's how many students complete a diploma with Mass Core, it's how many students complete college in 6 years. There are an extensive set of high school indicators that, all schools are using to evaluate rigor. I think US News and World Report uses a specific subset of those, often involving access to AP classes and things of that nature. But I don't think it's incredibly different from what BPS uses itself to define what schools are the highest performing. I would also say retention rate and graduation rates, of course.
Mr. Acevedo.
Thank you.
I'm always looking for ways to think about things that help simplify decisions, and part of it is a process of eliminating options. At its most basic, really, we really have 3 choices. And perhaps this is what this makes it perhaps a little easier on us. Number one, there are people who are calling us to go back to a world pre-2020 with respect to exam school admissions. That is an option. And I think most of us know how we all feel about that. The second is staying where we are. But some of the things that Ms. Garrett has shared and so on, even with the successes that we're seeing, is that even, legally, possible? And even if it were, will that get us to the place of equity and rigor, given all of the children and all of the testimonies that we've heard with respect to, from public comments and so on. And then the third is there another path that takes into account the things that we've heard and learned here, adjusting things so that we continue to see these rises in the representation of historically underrepresented populations in exam schools while maintaining their rigor. And as we've heard from students in our information sessions in here. Make this exam school admissions process as gaming resistant, and gaming proof as possible. That's going to be our eternal brass ring. So, I mean, if we figure that out, we're done.
Ms. Lum?
I think there are one quantitative and one qualitative measure of rigor we need to consider as we are thinking about our policy recommendations. One is purely based on achievement, and one is based on potential. And given the historic gaps in academic achievement based on MCAS results at all grade levels in the feeder population, we need to figure out a way to measure potential in order to, I think, create the socioeconomic and other diversity we're aiming for as we're thinking about invitations. Just putting in my 2 cents about rigor.
No, I think you raise a point that challenges the district to follow up on one of the recommendations that we made, and that is to provide the kind of support that students who demonstrate high potential can indeed, if they so choose, have the wherewithal to enter one of the 3 exam schools. I think that's an important point. Dr. Tung?
Oh, I just raised my hand because I wanted to hear from others about rigor.
Does anybody else have anything they might want to add? It is about 10 minutes of 7, and we still have to do some public comment work. Mr. Krager.
I would just note very quickly, knowing that this is a conversation that will likely continue into Tuesday, that maintenance of rigor ultimately is the task of the great school leaders that we have at our exam schools and on this task force, right? And it is it's ultimately not our charge, right?
That's right.
To achieve.
Ms. Grasso.
I would agree with Mr. Kreger. I believe the district has a definition of rigor, and that should be the one that's driving the conversation. We should not be reinventing this because this is not like an academics team task force.
So, and is the district definition of rigor the one that Ms. Garrett gave?
I don't want to quote anything right now, but I think we should come back with the district definition of rigor and use that as our base for the starting point.
Perhaps it might be helpful, Dr. Tung, for you to give us your definition of rigor so that we have a response if we need to make to it.
Oh, I said it a couple of meetings ago that for me, a rigorous education for my daughter would be where she's challenged, where she learns how to work together with people who are not like her in background and in learning style, where she encounters problems that she's never seen before, but can use what she learned in class to solve those problems, that she, is put in challenging situations and comes out stronger
Sure.
and more knowledgeable.
And thank you for that. I think what you've stated should be the district's definition. I mean, if indeed we're looking at that, you would be looking for, pretty much some sort of authentic academic achievement that exists throughout the district. You want intellectually challenging work. That should be something that the district embraces. You want knowledge to be constructive in a positive way. You want something that reflects that students are not just simply talked at, but there's disciplined inquiry based on the level of the students. And finally, you want to at least give the students some value added that goes beyond, you know, the class and school. That to me is where the district should be going. And I'd like to suggest that I didn't design those. I once met a fellow by the name of Newman, Fred Newman, who left this impression on me, and hopefully it's something that we can provide to the district as a whole, because it's extremely important. Last question.
Wait, can I just respond quickly?
Sure.
Well, just that, so just taking my daughter as an example, you know, she's a visual and kinesthetic learner and might not always have top grades and top test scores. But, you know, I would want schools to be able to meet her with her learning styles.
And if I may just, Mr. Acevedo, thank you for being patient. I can't disagree with you, but that challenge is something that really is, again, should be a district initiative. I mean, I think we will, as a group, suggest that we know a lot more now around how students learn, and we know a lot more now around brain development, and we know a lot more than we did when the environment was teach, test, and hope for the best. That requires, again, a district initiative that recognizes maybe it's sometime, it's not only should the district be dealing with social determinants, but they should also be looking at what some of the brain research is doing. But that, again, you know, is something that I believe the district should be looking at. Mr. Acevedo, and then if we can, I know we're beyond time, but I do want to get the public comment.
I know and I believe that everyone on this screen who's using the word rigor is doing so benignly. I just want to render a caution that there are folks out there who are using the word rigor in a very different kind of way, and are using that term just as a veiled way of excluding certain students in the name of rigor.
Mm-hmm.
And with it, they bring, you know, racist preconceived notions. But the shield they use is the word rigor. The word assessment has not been used tonight. I'm looking at the school leaders here, and I know that you folks have, you know, we really need you to elevate your voices as to what you think of that element. If this is to be reintroduced among the criteria for admissions. And in that respect, we are affecting the rigor of, you know, of that is part of our charge. Yeah, it's a scary term, and perhaps the the most, you know, the most potentially combustible word in our charge is rigor, precisely for all that it represents.
Thank you. Ms. Parvek, are we ready to go into public comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Contapasis. We have 2 speakers this evening, and each speaker will have 2 minutes per person. Those who require interpretation services will receive an additional 2 minutes. Please state your name, affiliation, what neighborhood you are from before you begin. When I call your name, please raise your hand virtually in Zoom. Also, please make sure you're signing to Zoom with the same name you used to sign up for public comment. That will allow us to identify you when it's your turn to testify. I will move you up as a panelist and we will ask you to turn on your camera for public comment. Our first speaker this evening is Alvin Lee, followed by Yufeng Rong. Could you please raise your hands? Alvin Lee. Alvin Lee, please unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello.
So should I start?
Yes, please start.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alvin Lee, and I am a 6th grader at BPS, currently living in West Roxbury. Tonight, I am here to share my thoughts about this year's Boston Exam School's admission criteria and the impact it brought to my fellow peers. As a kid, I have always been taught that hard work pays off, and I should always try my best for everything I do, which will prepare me for the best education opportunities. My parents immigrated to the US 16 years ago. Since then, they have been working very hard to pursue their career and provide a good education for my brother and I. That is the value I've learned from my family. As long as you work hard, you will get what you strive for. But this year, Boston Exam School's radical admission process changes made me question that value. I've been lucky enough to be accepted into BPS, one of the BPS exam schools, and a very good private school, while most of my classmates and friends weren't able to have the same options. Are they not working hard enough? Or are they not smart enough? Or they just live in the wrong zip codes? From my perspective, they are both intelligently capable and working very hard with a lot of potentials, but probably just not lucky enough to live in the right zip codes, or they have a strict teacher giving lower grades. Many of them are still processing this information. They have no choice but to accept this disappointing decision. I also feel very confused and frustrated. If hard work can't get us the best education opportunities, then what should we do to earn them? In my opinion, our fate should be determined by the amount of efforts we put in and the level of academic achievement instead of where we live and how much our parents make. In absence of a standardized entrance exam, zip code-based admission criteria in combination of unstreamlined GPA conversation rules are misleading, biased, and unfair. Thank you everyone for your attention.
Thank you. Next speaker is Yufeng Rong. Yufeng?
Yeah. Hello, good evening, everyone. I did my second vaccine shot last night. I'm having a fever, but I have been sitting here for more than 2 hours to listen to you. I hope you can give me 20 more seconds. So I'm from West Roxbury. I have only one child, and he is at Boston Latin School. Thank you all for working on this difficult task. I'd like to make 3 points today. First, it's extremely important to understand the impact of policy before implementing it. On a large scale, a bad policy can hurt the future of the whole city. I'm seeing people in my neighborhood pack and sell their houses because of this one-year policy and the uncertain future. On a small scale, it affects young lives and their families. I can give you an example for the current plan, what costs. So a 6th grader who ranked 183 citywide was not invited to any exam school. So 183 is within the top 20%. Even she selected only BLS, did not get in the 20% round. She should rank the top in the 80% and could get a seat. So I hope we can figure this out before moving forward. I also overlaid the census tract map on the zip code map and noticed that a tiny sliver of Chinatown is in tier 1. Probably 90% of Chinatown is in tier 4. So I hope you can do more research. Second, I understand that you are taking on a tremendously difficult task. Perhaps we can think outside the box. If we believe more students can deal with the rigorous curriculum, we should have BPS increase the number of exam schools. By doing that, both diversity and equity, as well as academic rigor, can be achieved, which is manifested by the great diversity of Boston Latin Academy and Oberlin School. BPS just received $400 million of federal fund. Some of you are sitting in that committee too. Perhaps we can suggest that BPS use part of fund to convert a regular school to the 4th exam school. Third, as the boy said, I don't think the children should be penalized because their parents work hard to earn advanced degrees or live in a particular neighborhood. Together, we should urge BPS to give more support to the needy children so that they can earn their exam seats. If I can add one more comment, the data that Ms. Roberts showed demonstrate that each of the AWC schools decreased by more than 10 seats. I hope we will not exclude our best BPS students in the coming year. Also, knowing the cutoff GPA for each zip code may help us to understand how to maintain rigor in the future. So when my son applied exam school, he ranked within the top 50 in the whole city. But as a 9th grader, he has to study until late night on many weekdays. So I just gave you this example, let you know how tough Boston Latin School is. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Contampassis, that concludes our speakers for public comment.
You're on mute, Mr. C. Sorry, that was my fault.
Ms. Skerritt insisted that I go on mute. And I always listen to the head of school. In any case, if there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion, please?
Also move.
Thank you, Mr. Krieger. Is there a second, Ms. Grasser?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion or objection to the motion? Hearing none. Ms. Parvek, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Contampassis. Mr. Acevedo?
Aye.
Ms. Aguirre?
Yes.
Mr. Krieger?
Aye.
Ms. Grasser?
Aye.
Ms. Lam?
Aye.
Ms. Nagasawa left. Ms. Skerritt?
Aye.
Dr. Tang?
Aye.
Ms. Wade?
Aye.
Ms. Sullivan? Oh, sorry. Mr. Contampassis.
Aye. And thank you all. My apologies for running a bit late, but we'll see you all on Tuesday. Thank you.